The Galactic Court of Arbitration had seen many unusual cases throughout its 3-century existence, but never had the marble halls witnessed such tension as when Princess Lyra of the Elvari Empire walked through those ancient doors. Her silver hair cascaded down her shoulders like liquid starlight, and her violet eyes held the wisdom of her 200-year lifespan. Behind her, a procession of the galaxy's most powerful beings filed into the courtroom, including her father, King Theron, whose weathered face bore the weight of countless diplomatic victories. At the defendant's table sat Captain Jake Morrison, a human from the Terran Federation. His brown hair was slightly disheveled from the journey, and his green eyes showed no fear despite facing the combined wrath of 3 galactic empires. The charges against him were unprecedented: unlawful abduction of alien royalty, violation of interstellar treaties, and disruption of a sacred bonding ceremony. Judge Kalen, an ancient being whose species had outlived several galactic civilizations, called the court to order. The crystalline gavel echoed through the chamber as beings from across the galaxy settled into their seats. Representatives from the Elvari Empire, the Crystal Confederation, and dozens of other civilizations had come to witness what many believed would be the trial of the century. The court recognizes the charges brought forth by the Elvari Empire against Captain Morrison, Judge Kalen announced, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Princess Lyra was reportedly taken from her homeworld during her engagement ceremony to Prince Valdris of the Crystal Confederation. Captain Morrison, how do you plead? Jake stood slowly, his uniform bearing the insignia of the Terran Deep Space Exploration Division. Your Honor, I plead not guilty to all charges. The princess came with me of her own free will. A collective gasp swept through the courtroom. King Theron's face darkened with rage, while Prince Valdris, whose crystalline features could cut, Diamond leaned forward with murderous intent. The Elvari delegation whispered among themselves in their melodic language, clearly shocked by the human's audacity. Impossible, King Theron declared, rising from his seat. My daughter would never abandon her duties to her people for a primitive human. Judge Kalen raised his hand for silence. Princess Lyra, you are called to testify. Please state your account of the events. Lyra stood gracefully, her royal bearing evident in every movement. The courtroom fell silent as she began to speak. 3 months ago, my father arranged my bonding to Prince Valdris to secure a military alliance between our empires. The ceremony was to take place on our sacred moon of Astoria. However, the night before the ritual, I encountered Captain Morrison. She paused, her eyes finding Jake's across the courtroom. His ship had suffered critical damage during an asteroid storm. Our patrols found him drifting in space, barely alive. Against protocol, I ordered his rescue and personally oversaw his medical treatment. And during this time, did the defendant attempt to influence you in any way? The prosecutor, a stern Elvari general named Korith, inquired. He did not, Lyra replied firmly. In fact, Captain Morrison was unconscious for the first week of his recovery. When he awoke, he was grateful but insisted on leaving immediately to avoid causing diplomatic trouble. It was I who convinced him to stay longer. The revelation sent murmurs through the gallery. King Theron's expression shifted from anger to confusion, while Prince Valdris remained stone-faced. During his extended stay, I learned about human culture and their concept of choice in romantic partnerships, Lyra continued. Captain Morrison never once suggested I abandon my duties. Instead, he listened when I expressed my fears about a loveless political union. He showed me that there were alternatives to a life dictated entirely by duty. Princess, Judge Kalen interjected, are you claiming that you chose to leave with the defendant of your own volition? I am, she answered without hesitation. The morning of my bonding ceremony, I realized I could not go through with marrying someone I did not love, creating an alliance built on my sacrifice. I sought out Captain Morrison and asked him to take me away. He initially refused, knowing the consequences, but I convinced him that my happiness mattered more than political convenience. The courtroom erupted in chaos. Elvari nobles shouted accusations while Crystal Confederation representatives demanded justice. King Theron sat heavily in his chair, the weight of his daughter's words crushing his composure. Jake stood again, his voice cutting through the noise. Your Honor, I wanted on record that I tried to talk Princess Lyra out of her decision. I explained the diplomatic ramifications and suggested she speak with her father first. She refused, stating that 3 centuries of arranged marriages in her family had produced nothing but misery disguised as duty. "You dare speak of our customs, human?" Prince Valdris finally spoke, his voice like grinding crystal. "The princess was mine, by right of treaty. No being belongs to another by treaty," Jake replied calmly. That's exactly the kind of thinking the princess was trying to escape. Judge Kalen studied the documents before him, the silence stretching like a taut wire. The implications of this case would ripple through galactic politics for generations. If he ruled in favor of the human, it would establish precedent that individual choice superseded political arrangements, potentially destabilizing centuries of diplomatic practice. "Princess Lyra," the judge said finally, "you understand that your actions have consequences beyond your personal happiness. The alliance between your people and the Crystal Confederation was meant to prevent a potential war with the Shadow Coalition." "I do understand, Your Honor," Lyra replied. "But I also believe that alliances built on forced marriages are inherently unstable. True partnership requires mutual respect and genuine commitment, not reluctant compliance." King Theron finally stood, his voice heavy with emotion. "My daughter, I have failed you. In my zeal to protect our people, I forgot that you are not merely a princess, but a person with your own dreams and desires." The admission shocked everyone present. An Elvari king publicly acknowledging fault was unprecedented in their culture. "However," the king continued, "your actions have still created a crisis. The Crystal Confederation views this as an insult that demands satisfaction." Judge Kalen deliberated for what felt like hours. When he finally spoke, his words would reshape galactic law forever. "After careful consideration, this court finds Captain Morrison not guilty of abduction. Princess Lyra's testimony clearly establishes that she left willingly. However, the court recognizes the diplomatic complexity of this situation." He turned to address the entire assembly. "Let this case establish new precedent. No being, regardless of title or political importance, can be compelled into marriage or bonding against their will. Political alliances must be built on foundations stronger than forced personal sacrifice." The ruling sent shockwaves through the galaxy, but it also marked the beginning of a new era where individual choice began to matter as much as political necessity. Years later, historians would mark this trial as the moment when the galaxy began to truly understand what humans meant when they spoke of freedom.